So, do you know how I ended up moderating this session? When Jerry and I started putting together the program, after a week I realized that he gets to moderate maybe 3, maybe 4 sessions. So I said, Jerry, what kind of partnership is this? You get everything, I get none. So he says, if you bring some of your friends from Israel, I'll give you 1 panel. So I did. And actually brought some of my best friends from Israel. They represent everything that Yigal. They represent everything and more, maybe more accurate, that is represented in Israel Startup Nation. And what we want to do in the next hour or so, try to understand what is so special. And for those of you who read the book, several times has a gentleman by the name of Yossi Vardi been quoted, because he is a typical entrepreneur, not so young, but certainly very entrepreneurial. He and his son developed something that then became ICQ, which they sold for $400 million to AOL. He was here in town. This I hear from a third party, from George Ross. He came to meet with a bunch of entrepreneurs in Toronto, and everybody asked him, so what is it that makes Israelis into entrepreneurs? So Yossi has a very special sense of humor, says, we get up in the morning and we are anxious. And when we're not anxious, we are afraid that we're not anxious. That's how we get entrepreneurial. So Yigal, let me first introduce you and your friends, and then I'll, in the meantime, prepare your answer. So first off, Yigal Erlich, probably the best way to describe him is he is a very humble person. So humble that people don't even know what he has done for the state of Israel. So in the mid-'80s, he was the chief scientist. He's not an advisor to, where's the chair? He's not an advisor. He's the chief scientist. Why is it the chief scientist? Every ministry has a chief scientist. But we always relate to that, the chief scientist of the Ministry of Industry of Commerce, because he's the only one who has money. So when we talk about the chief scientist, we talk about him, and Yigal was one of the first. He was in the 80s, contributed a lot to the industry. For example, those of you who know that Teva became an innovative producer, created the leading blockbuster called Copaxone. It's because of Yigal's support. Into the 90s, he started Yozma. Yozma is really the inception of the venture capital industry in Israel. From then, he decided that he might as well spend some time, retire, and become a venture capitalist. Did you enjoy it? Sort of.
Until today.
But we remained friends, and I say, Yigal, you have to take care of the biotech of Israel. So as of the beginning of the 3rd century, he started his pilgrimage to the Ministry of Finance, and the net result of that is what we call the Yozma. And Nissim will allude to it when his turn comes. So Yigal, thank you for what you've done, and you can share with the owners when your turn comes. Nissim, he's a typical entrepreneur. In Hebrew, there's a term that says, Hu shachach ma shanachnu lo lamadnu, which means he already forgot what we haven't learned. So he's been in academics, he's been in startup, he's been in successful startups, and then he went into venture capital. How did you end up in bio-venture is beyond me, but you will have to explain it. So here is Orbimed Israel. Last but not least, Yaacov Michlin, CEO of Yissum. So my story with Yaacov goes as follows. I used to be a tech transfer officer in Israel. And Yaacov, as part of one of the leading law firms, listen carefully, Jay, one of the leading law firms in Israel, always gave me grief. He represented Teva, he represented others. And I said to myself, one day I will get even, Yaacov. I didn't know how. Guess what? All of a sudden, I don't know what happened to him, he decided to become a tech transfer officer. So probably some lawyers give you grief, right? Okay, without further ado, Yigal, why do you think that Israel claims to fame as being a country of entrepreneurial spirit?
Well, the question of how Israel became an entrepreneurial hub, it's a nice question. You can get many answers for that. And I'm not going into the details of what's make an individual to be an entrepreneur. The situation of Israel, everybody knows about it, and the type of people and the other things. That's obvious. I want to say a few words about what you should do once you know that you have the potential of entrepreneurs. I don't know if Canada is a place where entrepreneurs can emerge. One thought that I have about it, that maybe you have a too good life here. So it's very difficult to be an entrepreneur in an environment which is not having any challenges. So in Israel you have many challenges, and that's why maybe many people try and challenging many targets. But what is more important is once you think you have this potential of entrepreneurs, in order to increase it, nurturing it, you must have the right ecosystem. Because if you don't have it, it will not help the entrepreneurs as well. It will be in a certain extent. And it is in Israel, I think, until the 90s, the level of entrepreneurs was much lower than it is today. And when you speak about ecosystem, there are many components there. And I must say, not like what I heard from Senator Jerry before that the government has a very important role. The government is not the only one in the ecosystem. There are the universities, there are all the financial institutions, but each and every one of them is playing a very important role, including the entrepreneurs. Without one component, the entrepreneurs will not succeed as they succeed now in Israel. And if we talk about government, I think that in Israel, if you look backward, since the 70s, there was a very clear policy that Israel must develop technology and science, because this is the only chance. We talked at that time about innovation. We understood that innovation can make us competitive in the world markets. And since then until today, it is still clear to the people and to the government that this is a first priority. If you don't have it by the government as a first priority, you can discuss, days and nights what the government should do, but they will do nothing if you do not convince them that this is the most important thing to do. In Israel, fortunately, this is what happened. And that is why the government created what you know as a chief scientist office. It's not exactly dealing with science, it's more a funding organization for technology mainly, for industries, and funding by grants. Up to 50% of each project in any company can get a grant from the chief scientist, if it's standing the criteria, of course. And that is not only financing, that's also a broadcasting that Israel is committed to develop technology. But that's, as you know, it's not enough in the financing world. If it is only the government, nothing can happen, only problems. So the government also understands that, and the government understands that private sector can do much better than what the government can, especially when you talk about investment. So this is why the government is trying to step away from investing directly in companies, but more in a way in fund of funds. And this is why also the government encourage venture capital. We started it in the 90s, and it's still encouraging today if it identified that there is a flow in the ecosystem, and that's what we understood, as Raphael said a few years ago, that we have a problem in the biopharma or the biotechnology industry, because we don't have, as an example, we don't have in Israel, like we have in the ICT, the full ecosystem. Is the one thing that is missing is the international intervention or involvement in Israel.
Just, I have a little, I agree with what Yigal said, but I don't think that, with all the respect to the Israeli government, that the Israeli government is the key point for one of the keys. So
before you continue, because I had to bring it out in terms of getting even, I forgot to mention that Yaacov Michlin is CEO of Yissum, which is the tech transfer company for the Hebrew University.
Okay.
No.
So I just want to follow what Yigal said, and some of the speakers here already touched this, but to whom in the audience that don't know it, but Israel unfortunately doesn't have any natural resources. We have, unfortunately, a very high home defense budget, and the costs of labor in Israel are relatively high, and they are still growing. So the Israeli, as a nation, had to find areas in which we can do what is good for the Israeli economy, and this is the classical high-tech and biotech, and I think this is one of the main reasons why we concentrate on high-tech and biotech. And President Peres always gives a nice story about how the area where I live in Rehovot, we changed the place from growing oranges into the biotech center. But the question is, what is I think the key factor why Israel is so good in high-tech and biotech? And as you said, because I'm the CEO of the tech transfer of the Hebrew University, so I must take my perspective, and I think that this is actually one of the major keys. And I think that in Israel we have extremely good academic institutions and extremely good academic achievements. I can just, later on, Raphael will allow me 7 minutes of presentation, but I can just give a brief examples about the Hebrew University. So in a relatively small university compared to the world, we have 6 Nobel laureates. We are generating royalties that are equal to royalties that are generated by leading US universities with 10 times our budget for R&D. So then we can ask ourselves the question, what is the reason for this? How come in Israel we have such impressive academic achievements? And for this, it's a very short story. I've been in a meeting in Zurich, and I met a leading scientist in the area of brain research, and she told me that her dream is to join the new brain research center that is now incorporated in the Hebrew University. So I asked her.
She then contacted us. She wants to come to Toronto.
Maybe, but anyway, so I asked her, how come? I mean, she has access to the best equipment. She has almost unlimited budget, and still she believes that she can make the best science in Israel. And then I came back to Israel, and I spoke with some of the professors in the Brain Research Center, and they told me that much of the keys for success for the Israeli academic achievement is first the nature of the students in the Israeli academic institution, and it's not something that we can deal here with 2 minutes, but it's something that Yigal said about the creativity, the willingness to know, and I must also mention what Yigal touched, and I think that in Israel we are leveraging the disadvantage because the system in the Israeli universities is different than what I think is in Canada and Western Europe, and Israeli researchers that wants resources to his lab has to compete based on excellency, even to get money from the Israeli government or to get grants from European or US resources, he has to prove that he is better than others. That's why we are leading in the ERC grants in the world in our university, and that's a key for funding of the lab. So if you have to compete all the time for excellency with worldwide leaders, so you must be better than others and faster in your achievements.